On April 11, 2025, a quiet but powerful moment in history unfolded inside St. Peter's Basilica in Vatican City. The world stood still, eyes fixed on a scene of both great tradition and great transformation. On that sacred day, Cardinal Luis Tagle stepped forward and was crowned Pope, taking on the name Pope Luis XIII. The world witnessed a turning point, not only for the Catholic Church, but for millions of faithful around the globe. What made this moment even more memorable wasn't just that he became the first Asian pope and the first Filipino to wear the papal crown. It was the mysterious promise he made moments after his coronation. A simple yet powerful phrase spoken with gravity: "A new covenant rises." This one line left the world stunned. Some were moved to tears, others fell into deep reflection, and many were left wondering, what did it mean? Inside the basilica, the atmosphere was beyond words. The air was thick with incense, creating a soft mist of sacred fragrance. Sunlight poured through the stained glass windows, dancing across the marble floors. It was more than just a ceremony. It was a living tapestry of faith, history, and human emotion. Chants echoed through the high arches. They weren't just sounds, they were memories centuries old, floating into the present. As Pope Luis I stepped forward, his face calm, his eyes soft yet firm, a sense of peace settled over the crowd. His smile, gentle and warm, seemed to reach not only those inside the Vatican, but millions more watching from homes around the world. Technology had made it possible for the faithful in the farthest villages and largest cities to witness this moment in real time. It was as though heaven and earth were holding hands. Luis Tagle's story is as remarkable as the moment itself. Born in the vibrant streets of Manila, a city full of life, struggle, and resilience, he came from humble beginnings. He wasn't born into wealth or power, but was raised in the arms of everyday people. From his early days as a parish priest, he connected with his community, not just as a religious leader, but as a fellow human being. People saw him not as someone above them, but among them. His rise through the church was steady and strong. He served faithfully, first as a bishop, then Archbishop of Manila, and later as a cardinal. With each new role, he didn't grow distant from the people. Instead, he seemed to grow closer. His sermons were filled with sincerity. His leadership was marked by compassion. He became known as a man who led not just with knowledge, but with heart. It's this very character that has brought him to the highest seat of the Catholic Church. But this moment wasn't just about the rise of a man. It marked a shift in the very foundation of the Church. For centuries, the leadership of the Vatican had remained centered in Europe. Now, with Pope Luis XII at the helm, the Church was acknowledging its truly global nature. This change gave hope to millions, especially those in developing countries, who had long felt that their voices were too quiet to reach Rome. As he took his place on the papal throne, the silence in St. Peter's Square was almost surreal. The crowd was large, yet no one spoke. There was a sacred stillness in the air, as though even the birds paused their flight. Everyone was waiting for his first words as Pope. What would he say? What vision would he cast? His inaugural address was spoken in clear English, not grandiose, not dramatic, just steady and meaningful. He spoke of unity, of love, of the Church's eternal commitment to stand beside the poor and the outcast. He talked about rebuilding trust in a world that has grown weary from division. And then, towards the end, he paused. He looked out over the sea of faces, his gaze strong and steady, and he said, "A new covenant rises." In that moment, it felt as if time had stopped. These 4 words were like a key unlocking 100 questions. What is this new covenant? What does it mean for the Church, for the world, for the individual? The phrase took root quickly. It began spreading like wildfire across the world. Social media lit up. Religious scholars began writing essays. News anchors scrambled to interpret it. Was it symbolic? Was it literal? Was it a sign of a major change in doctrine or just a poetic metaphor for new beginnings? For the faithful, it became a moment of deep reflection. Many turned to prayer, others engaged in conversation, both. In church halls and at family dinner tables, the phrase awakened something in people. It was mysterious, it was hopeful, and it stirred something ancient within the human soul. For theologians, the phrase became a puzzle to solve. Some believed Pope Louis XIV was hinting at a major reform within the Church. Maybe it was a return to simplicity, a focus on humble worship, on the core teachings of Jesus, a movement away from wealth, politics, and ceremony, and back to love, service, and community. Others thought he might be talking about unity, a call to break down the walls between Christian denominations, maybe even a message to reach out beyond Christianity, to build bridges with other religions. After all, Pope Louis XIV has always been known for his openness to interfaith dialogue. There were also those who believed it was more personal, that the Pope was asking each individual to renew their own spiritual journey. In a world filled with noise and distractions, he was inviting people to return to the quiet space of the heart, to reconnect with God not through fear but through love. But perhaps the most powerful part of this mystery is that it wasn't explained. It was simply given, a seed planted in the soil of the soul, a question, not an answer. And in that way, it mirrored so many of the spiritual experiences that define human life. The quiet moment in a chapel when you feel something stir inside. The time you sit in nature and suddenly feel connected to something greater. The moment of silence before a prayer, where the heart speaks louder than words. Pope Louis XIV's words invited people to return to these sacred spaces within themselves. The phrase, "a new covenant rises," wasn't just spoken to inspire curiosity, it was spoken to awaken the spirit. And that's exactly what it did. In the days and weeks that followed, churches around the world saw a rise in attendance. Not because people wanted answers, but because they wanted connection to their faith, to one another, to something eternal. Interfaith events were organized in cities across the globe. From Manila to Madrid, New York to Nairobi, people came together to talk, to listen, and to hope. Religious leaders from different backgrounds stood side by side, inspired by the Pope's words, looking to the future with a shared sense of purpose. Inside the Vatican, discussions continued. Some insiders say reforms may be coming. Others say the phrase was more spiritual than structural. But what no one denies is that Pope Louis XIV had stirred something powerful, something deep. Even those outside the Catholic faith found themselves moved by the Pope's address. The universal message of love, renewal, and unity reached beyond the walls of the Church. It touched people of all beliefs, because at its core the phrase didn't speak only to religion, it spoke to the human heart. In the solitude of quiet chapels, the glow of candlelight flickered a little differently after those words. In busy cities, as people hurried through their lives, they paused for a moment to think. In homes across the world, families prayed together, asking what this new covenant might mean for them. And maybe that's the point. Maybe Pope Louis XIV didn't mean to provide a roadmap. Maybe he simply wanted to call us forward, into mystery, into hope, into action. His promise was not about answers, but about questions worth asking. It was not about doctrine, but about direction. It wasn't about explaining the path. It was about encouraging each of us to start walking. As time moves forward and Pope Louis XIV begins his leadership, the world will be watching. But more than that, the world will be listening. For what comes next? Will there be announcements, reforms, a shift in tone? No one knows for sure, and perhaps that's exactly how it should be. Because faith is not built on certainty, it's built on trust. On taking the next step even when we don't see the full path. On believing that the